So I just came upon a really interesting article written by Dean Mullen titled "Why the Saints Deserve to Be Favorites to Win the NFC South in 2021." I'm going to link the article down in the comment section down below. It's going to be in the pinned comment, so you guys can go ahead, read it, and check it out. But I thought that this was a really interesting take because when you look at the title, of course, everybody's not going to take it serious. Everybody's going to call him delusional because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers obviously are pretty much everybody's pick to win the division. But when I read the article, he makes some pretty valid points. So everybody has the Buccaneers penciled in automatically to win the NFC South this year. And the main reason for that is because of the recency bias, which is pretty much what he was describing in the majority of his article. Everybody's so high on the Buccaneers because they're just coming off a Super Bowl win. They returned pretty much the whole entire roster from that championship team, and everybody has the right to be really high on the Buccaneers. But everybody's so focused on the recency bias, which is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just recently winning the Super Bowl, and everybody seems to forget how good of a team that the Saints have. Now, I understand that the Saints did lose Drew Brees, and you have a big question mark with Jameis Winston at quarterback. But aside from that, this is still one of the better teams in the NFL. And basically, this article is taking a deep dive into the narrative, because remember, around this time last year, the roles were kind of reversed. Tampa Bay was the team that people were kind of unsure about, and the New Orleans Saints were not only predicted to win the division, but they also were a heavy favorite to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl for the 2020-2021 NFL season. Now it seems like those roles have shifted, and people have kind of forgotten that the Saints still exist and that the Saints still are a really doggone good football team. Now, he did say some things that I do disagree with, like he talked about how Tom Brady is going to decline eventually, and we know Tom Brady is going to have to hang it up. We obviously know that Tom Brady is not the quarterback that he used to be when he was in his prime. But I'm not going to sit here and try to predict when Tom Brady is finally going to decline, because everybody has been talking about the cliff for over the last 5-6 years. I think that ship has pretty much sailed. Like, two athletes that I never bet against are LeBron James and Tom Brady, because they take phenomenal care of their body. They're in great shape. And every time you count those guys out, every time it seems like they're done, they always bounce back and shock the world. So Tom Brady, I'm not going to say that he's going to, eventually fall off. I don't like trying to predict when players are going to decline, because it's something that you can't really predict. It just happens. So I understand why many people feel Tom Brady is going to decline, because he is really old. He's like in his 40s pretty much. And I understand why people believe that. But people say this about Tom Brady every single year, and I'm not in the market of trying to predict when guys are going to fall off and when they're going to decline, because as a Steeler fan, that gets really annoying, because people for years have been saying that Big Ben is washed up, he's finally going to break, and he ends up still having a really good year. So I really disagree with that point, but I think the rest of the article is pretty valid. He makes some pretty valid points. Even though Tampa Bay does have a really good team, they have the same team that won the Super Bowl last year, everybody's forgetting how good the Saints are. And the Saints had some really competitive games with the Buccaneers last season. So on top of that, the Saints pretty much were mopping the floor with the Bucs at one point. So for me, yes, I'm still going to side with the fact that the Buccaneers are going to win the division, but I understand where this article is coming from. I understand that a lot of people are so focused on how good the Buccaneers are, nobody's really paying too much attention to the New Orleans Saints. Everybody in the media has been talking about the Buccaneers all off season. You haven't really heard anything about New Orleans aside from the quarterback controversy, which is who's going to be starting, Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill. But when you look at the Saints roster, this is still a really good team. They have a pretty good offensive line. The defense is really good. Even though you have questions about who's going to be that second corner aside from Marshawn Lattimore, this is still a really good team. This was a Saints team that was kind of strapped by salary cap issues over the offseason, but they did a pretty good job working around that. You did lose Emmanuel Sanders, so you don't know who's going to be that second option on the opposite side of Michael Thomas. You still have Alvin Kamara, one of the 5 best backs in the league. This is a really good team. So I understand everybody with the recency bias obviously is going to have favoritism towards the team that had more success as of late, but everybody has forgotten, it seems like, how good the Saints are. And it felt like that last year. I think I made a video about it. Did we just forget how good the Saints actually are? Like, when the Saints dominated and smacked around the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the way they did in their second matchup, I think everybody came to the realization that, hey, man, like, we forgot about New Orleans. Like, New Orleans also has a team that's more than capable of being able to win the Super Bowl. And I feel like that's going to be the same narrative this year. Now, the Saints, you know, nobody really knows if they're going to make it to the playoffs or not this year. I think they will. I have a lot of confidence in Jameis Winston. Yes, I am heavily biased towards Jameis Winston because Jameis Winston is my favorite player in the NFL. I believe that he's going to be able to pick up where Drew Brees left off. Feel like he's going to end up winning comeback player of the year, either him or Dak Prescott. And I feel like he's going to be able to lead the Saints to the playoffs this year. Now, when you look at Jameis Winston, obviously we know the turnover numbers are a big factor, and everybody talks about what he did a couple of years back in 2019, which was the last time we've seen Jameis Winston play. And he also talked about this a little bit in his article as well. So you do have some question marks about the New Orleans Saints, but everybody seems to forget that this is a new year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, anything could happen. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for all we know, they might be a playoff team, but they might not be the Super Bowl caliber team that they were a year ago, because the NFL is always changing. You're never going to get the same team twice. Either you're going to have a team that was better than what they were last year, or either worse than what they were the season prior. So with the recency bias, I definitely agree. I feel like a lot of people are riding the Tampa Bay Buccaneers simply for the fact that they won the Super Bowl. And in the media, he also talked about this. They don't really do a lot of research in the media. They normally just go off who was the best team last year, and the best teams from last year, they pretty much picked to be in the playoffs once again. Nobody really does a lot of deep diving and doing a lot of research and whatnot, and to finding out which teams could be up and coming, which teams could end up missing out on the playoffs that made it last year. So I understand what he means when it comes to the media always siding with favorites, especially when you look at fantasy football. This is a good example of this. So in fantasy football, the top 10 normally stays the same every single year. That's because they take the top 10 finishers from the previous year and they pretty much put them in the top 10 for the upcoming season. So that's a good example of how the media bias works, and how the media doesn't really do a lot of deep diving into teams. They pretty much choose teams who were successful last season, and they may change at least one or two of those teams, but it's pretty much the same, and not a lot of reasoning and not a lot of, research goes into this. So that's another thing that I agree with. But ultimately, I think that this is a pretty good read. Make sure that you guys go ahead, check this article out. I had a really good time reading this article, because I felt like at first when I saw the title, I was like, man, this what? So I clicked on it, and I understand where he's coming from. And I think he understands that the Saints probably won't win the NFC South, but I get the point that he was trying to make. I think the point that he was trying to make, the purpose of making this article for him, was to kind of remind everybody that, hey, the Saints still are here. They still have a really good team, even with the departure of Drew Brees into retirement. Yes, you have some question marks. Yes, you have some concerns, but the Saints still are a pretty good football team, and a lot of people are sleeping on the Saints this year. I think that's what the purpose of this article was about. So you guys let me know down in the comment section down below. Sound off. Do you think the Saints deserve to get a little bit more recognition and credit than what they're receiving right now? Do you guys think they could win the NFC South this season? Make sure that you guys like the video, share the video with your friends, family, acquaintances on your social media platforms, and subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and college football content. And thanks for watching.